This call is now being recorded.
Okay. Visual Master, brethren all, I take this opportunity to present a paper on the history of the tracing board or tracing boards and Masonic traditions. I hope I'm audible and visible. My presentation is visible to everyone. A tracing board, as we know, is a as you know in Masonic degree is used to illustrate ideas and principles of its degrees. The origins of the tracing board go back to the Masonic lodges of the 18th century and even earlier. However, there is more to it, as we shall soon see. While the tracing board today is looked upon as an ornament in the lodge room, for me also, I did not know of it much till fairly recently, which can have various designs for the brethren to moralize upon. The main aim of a tracing board, as used by operatives, Brother Manoj may remember, not operative, but rather free or speculative. So the operative masons, the actual masons, they used it to lay out, plan, and design for the building to be constructed. We keep hearing of King Solomon as his temple is the basis of much of our rituals in our lodge and elsewhere. But it seems tracing boards were in use in the old Middle Eastern countries long before King Solomon's temple was planned and constructed. For example, in Persia, when called upon to erect a building, Persian craftsmen worked out the scheme for the building on a sectional tracing board divided into horizontal and vertical lines. I guess this looks like a kid's math exercise book. That's why I mentioned in the first slide header that the images are for representation purposes only. Okay, so the Persians used to construct a bricks in a.
Sorry, Brother Sushil, are you presenting?
Yes, is my presentation visible?
No, I'm just seeing some squares like a grid.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that is the presentation. It is visible.
So I'm on the fourth slide. So I had a few other slides earlier on. So you could pin that presentation. So I'm on two devices. Okay. So the Persians used to construct the bricks in a square shape, not in oblongs as we know the bricks today. So the tracing board was laid on the floor of the workroom, and it was possible to erect a workable model before starting the building, construction of the building. So if these rough plans were good enough, so they were copied on a stiff paper or parchment, and sometimes they could be as long as 20 feet. So the roll was then finished with a piece of leather with a thong attached to kind of tie up the scroll, and for ease of carrying and also ease of hiding should the occasion arise. So such parchments were not made into books till Roman times, and we are talking of much earlier. So a system of squared boards appeared to have been passed on to the Egyptians also, who of course we know are great builders of the pyramids and the Sphinx and so on. So, but the Egyptians not only used these boards for sculpture and stone cutting, but also for the form of painting. There is also evidence that a similar method of recording plans was used in India. Okay, so this was something which I learned, that something similar, tracing boards were used. So this is again, like I said, for representation purposes only. Coming to United Kingdom, where the history of Freemasonry is, it is said that the structural workmanship of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, made famous, of course, in Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. So the structural workmanship is the epitome of the stonemasonry culture, while the decorative features are representative of the Freemasonry culture. So both together. So apparently this 15th century chapel has images of so many tools and symbols that have become icons of the Masonic Lodge tradition, that they are now artistically depicted on various tracing boards to help in the instruction process of the new Masons. Also, it is often thought that the precursors of tracing boards were cloths that are unrolled onto the floor of a lodge. Lawrence Gardner, the British author who wrote the book The Shadow of Solomon, The Lost Secret of Freemasons Revealed in 2005, of course, passed into the ages in 2009. By the way, Brother Ankit, if you want to buy, it's available on Amazon for less than 2,500, including delivery. So Lawrence Gardner writes that it is not strictly true to say that the boards took the place of floor cloths, since boards were also laid on the floor and each may have been used for different ritual purposes. So Gardner suggests that both the cloths and the boards their history are parallel and evolutionary. So what was this history? So before we go into this history, there is a quiz for which I would request Vashur brother Venkat's help. Brother Venkat, you can take the reins of the presentation from me and kind of present your question. Brother Venkat?
The Venkat, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Or he may have to present. Yes. So the question is, in which pub was the first Grand Lodge formed? The four options which are given below: Gander and Geese, Victorian Albert, Goose and Gridiron, Grand Iron and Goose. Please do not answer here. There is a menti.com on your phones. Go to menti.com and use the code 315268. Get in and you would find the question and you can answer. If you can hear me and you are only on menti.com, I will repeat the code for those who are getting it: 315268. We can have one answer.
How do I get to menti.com? I have to open another site.
Type.
Could open another browser.
So the quiz takes care of actually one or two paragraphs. So it seems like a song in an Indian movie. Which
Can you repeat the code, Brother Sushil?
315268. 315268. So this also reminds me, Indian movie. So reminds me, I should check with Brother Cristobal if he has seen any.
Brother Sushil, I can't get on with 315266.
68.
68. Okay.
68. 315268. It's also up on the presentation itself, on the top. Okay, we have 6 answers, and I cannot see because I'm on phone. I don't know how many people. 18 out of 18, 6, 1/3 have replied. 7. Okay, so let's go further. 7 is good enough. All for Goose and Gridiron. Of course, our own lodge has the restaurant called Goose and Gridiron. Brother Venkat, you can hand over the reins back to me, and I can.
Yes, I have. You can start presenting now.
Yes, I would just. Can people see my screen? Yes,
Okay, what's going on?
Okay. Right. So as we know, can you see my screen now?
No, the presentation has not come, Sushil.
Okay. It shows me that you're presenting to everyone. So let me just try. Now?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay, so as we know that the Grand Lodge of England met in 24 on 24th June 1717 at the Goose and the Gridiron, and our lodge also has this restaurant called the Goose and Gridiron after that. So moving on, so any room, and what used to happen is why did the Grand Lodge get formed at the Goose and the Gridiron was any room chosen for a meeting, and at that time they used to happen at the back rooms of taverns, and any room chosen for a meeting had to be prepared and fitted with the appropriate trappings and furniture, and again back restored. So I think we still use the words prepare and restore. I don't know. I mean, I would have to check with maybe virtual brother Vimal after this. So, but at the time, everything related to the creating the proper environment for a lodge was portable. And one of the functions of the tiler was to mark out on the structure of the lodge on the floor using chalk or any other such marker. The shape was called an oblong square, which seems ambiguous. I mean, you can look at this structure. The bottom part seems like the oblong square. So, and after the degree was completed, the candidate would be directed to remove the chalk drawings with a mop and bucket. This would also be a reminder to his oath of secrecy. I read somewhere that for some time, a bucket with a mop was also an associated imagery with Freemasonry. I mean, senior brethren may advise after this presentation. So during non-degree meetings, they would still draw the chalk drawings as a reminder to the brothers that of the lessons that of the fraternity. Another pompous term used for this kind of a structure on the floor was parallel piped-on. So a word which means a prism which bases are parallelograms, and to this basic shape, various Masonic symbols were added. As time went on, as the meetings became better organized, instead of having to mark out and later clean up the markings and symbols, the information was marked out on cloth, which could be simply unrolled before the meeting, and after it's over, it would be rolled up. So as per again Lawrence Gardner, as the concept became more popular, Masonic symbols were added to the designs, followed by individual cloths that were attributed to the different degrees of working. Artists became more ambitious, and instead of bearing mere basic outlines, they transformed the cloths into artworks in their own right. This led to a situation where some of the floor cloths were so heavily worked and expensive that nobody wanted to walk on them. So instead, they were hung on display like conventional paintings. It seems so in the picture. I mean, I can see a couple of pictures on the sides, on the pillars. So, which gave rise to a practical dilemma. Where was the lodge? It was on the wall. Another reason could be that the earlier operative lodge was held out of doors, where the ritual enclosure was marked out on the ground. When the lodges moved indoors, they continued the customs they were used to, and the ritual enclosure had therefore to be formed on the floor of the meeting room. The problem another problem arose of damaging the floor by walking on the markings of the floor cloths, and which gave rise to a practice called squaring the lodge. Now, Lawrence Gardner points out that it was not of the heel clicking type of army style kind of precise squaring. Deacons, please note, but simply a natural caution to avoid disturbing or spoiling the design. The practice, he mentioned, the practice of squaring is wholly admirable because this adds much to the dignity of the ceremonies, so long as it is not carried to the extremes. Now I remember why we keep squaring at every turn. So it became the practice to deem a lodge operatively formed so long as the cloth was displayed. But since different cloths were used for different degrees, they could not be hung permanently. But the matter of portability was still a concern, how to carry it around. And there was a question of size. Floor cloths were necessarily large. And the most common practice, therefore, was to not hang them, but instead they were draped onto planks that were raised on trestles. So this is an earlier picture, so which gave rise to the term trestle board. And in my research over the last day and a half, I came across several mentions of trestle board in Masonic, which could be another paper maybe. Even after this, the size was still inconvenient in smaller lodges and caused problems with carrying around and all that. So they started making smaller panels, so easier to handle than cloth drapes, and were often supported on easels. Now, Gardner says that rules were never established for the designs of floor cloths or tracing boards. They were supposed to just do the fulfill the respective functions that are required for the degrees. Many and various designs were developed, and sometimes they are complete as a stand, and in some other instances, the members could draw lines or additions during the lectures. And despite the fact that some of the lodges had moved into their own buildings, most grand lodges discouraged the use of such cloths and boards, since they were now a permanent display and could not be erased with a simple swipe of a mop. So they were more concerned about secrecy than all these cloths and boards. And this evolution took some more time. By 20th century, however, the idea of the tracing board began to die out. In the form of tracing it on the floor. And also because, like I said, more lodges started moving from the back room of a tavern and into their own buildings. The idea that the lodge had to be 100% portable, sometimes even referred to as a lodge in a box, had gone away. And it was now easier to have more permanent displays or larger items that could be used to illustrate the ideas and principles of Freemasonry. In another account that I read about, so similarly, it was mentioned that the time-consuming business of redrawing the symbols at every meeting was gradually replaced by keeping a removable floor cloth on which various symbols are painted, and different portions were exposed according to the work being executed. By the second half of the 18th century, the Masonic symbols were being painted on a variety of removable materials, ranging from small marble slabs to canvas, to give a more decorative and elaborate symbolic display. Because the symbols portrayed on the tracing board are nearly all evident in a lodge, the tracing board can be said to be a small model of a lodge. Similar to how floor cloths developed and where they're hung on a wall, the tracing board is the historical development of the lodge on the wall. During the 19th century, again, there were rapid expansion of permanent painted tracing boards, usually painted on canvas and framed in wood. Artists produced competing designs. Some became very popular, leading to some repetition of favored design features. So now, as per this little blue book that we all have, which is called Emulation Ritual, which comes to you, Brother Ankit, only if you're a master mason. So it says that it's not a common practice. It talks about tracing boards, and it says that it was not even common practice, even in 1845, to display and change boards in the Emulation Lodge of Improvement. So what is this Emulation Lodge of Improvement? I would come back to a bit later. So also because the boards were too large and heavy to permit easy handling, there was no procedure on this. So Emulation Lodge, what they used to do was they used to change during an interval when the lodge is called off. But I realize now, and in private lodges like us and smaller ones, more portable boards started getting generally used, and they were normally changed whenever the degree in which the lodge is open is changed, immediately after the junior warden has used his gavel. And commonly the boards lean against the junior warden's pedestal. It is usually the charge of the junior deacon to change the board, or sometimes the director of ceremonies at installation. The junior deacon should go straight from his place to the boards, change them quietly, and return straight to his place. He should not take his wand. He should not seek any form of confirmation from the junior warden that the correct board is about to be displayed. The inner guard also should not wait for the board to be changed before going to the doors to give the knocks. As an aside, some interesting stuff I came about this blue book, which I got, of course, when I became a master mason, is published by a body called the Emulation Lodge of Improvement. So if I am visible, so there is this, it says as demonstrated at the Emulation Lodge of Improvement, London, and with whose approval this ritual has been compiled and published. So there are some interesting facts I came to know about this Emulation Lodge of Improvement, and thanks for this paper presentation. So this body was established after the United Lodge of England was formed in December 1813. The aim of this lodge, this particular lodge, was by the way, which is open only to master masons of good standing. Okay, it was not open to everyone. It was only for master masons and that of good standing. Is to preserve Masonic ritual as close as possible as it was accepted by UGLE in 1816. So ritual was standardized with the approval of Grand Lodges of Ireland and Scotland. So in a way, this lodge, this Emulation Lodge of Improvement, is an international body governing the relations between the three lodges of England, Ireland, and Scotland. The Emulation Ritual Lodge first met on 2nd October 1823. And this is still they are around, and they have this annual festival. So you can see on your screen. And it has been the policy of the Committee of Emulation Lodge of Improvement to preserve the ritual, like I said, as nearly as possible in the form in which it was approved by the Grand Lodge. And allowing those and allowing only those changes to happen as the Grand Lodge would approve. And but the name given to this entire ritual book is the Emulation Lodge of Improvement, and it's nothing. It does not say, and not the other way around of the Grand Lodge ritual or something. And further on, I came to know that some of the most notable changes in the emulation ritual were made in 1964 when an alternative form of reference to the ancient penalties was approved. Someday would like to know what they were. And again in 1986, when a resolution from UGLE decreed that the so-called blood oaths or symbolic penalties were also to be removed from the obligation taken by candidates for the 3 degrees or installation as a master. So I guess we are all spared. All of us almost are spared of all this. So in this special lodge, when a brother acts as a master of any of the demonstrated ceremonies and delivers the work without any need of prompt or correction, he is awarded rather an inscribed silver matchbox on the first occasion, and which could have some additional inscriptions added for each of the other emulation ceremonies worked. Now coming back to the tracing boards, we cannot have a topic on tracing boards without talking about the current tracing boards and how they came about. So they are by an English artist, John Harris Jr., and it is an opportunity to talk about his impact on Freemasonry. Harris joined Freemasonry in 1818 during a time of exciting cultural developments because the UGLE was formed, British Masons were moving away from the tavern culture. The Masons, they were now owners of beautiful, massive buildings and could adorn them with permanent furnishings such as pipe organs, antique art, and so on. So part of the standardization occurring in the furnishings of the new building was that a set of tracing boards was standardized. So upon entering the lodge, Harris was, he was a talented painter. He was a fast symbolist, which means basically he was able to copy everything very well, and an architectural draftsman. So he could do this pretty well. And this is the picture, of course, of the London Freemasons Hall in 1809. And in 1823, Harris dedicated a set of such tracing boards to Augustus Frederick, who was the Duke of Sussex and the first Grand Master of the UGLE. The Grand Master recognized his talent, and he perhaps, it's assumed, there is another account which I would come to later, it's assumed that he commissioned Harris to make a standard official model for each degree. So these developments helped to standardize the designs, and until that point, there was no consistency in the way the boards were painted. It was not unusual for various lodges to have their own variety of symbols and designs and employ their own artists. So why are symbols on a tracing board important to a Freemason? So there's a book called Symbolism of Freemasonry by Albert Mackey, who suggests that the symbols are illustrated for each degree are a key to its mystery. So he writes, to study the symbolism of Masonry is the only way to investigate its philosophy. So in Masonic teachings, symbols are a way to investigate the deeper meanings because they speak to the whole human being and not only to the limited waking intelligence. Important to note, so even to the subconscious. So that the symbol will communicate its message even when the conscious mind remains unaware of the fact. The power of the symbol does not depend on it being understood by the conscious mind, I think. So Harris, coming back to Harris, so he spent his whole life painting and studying, and over time, as his Masonic career progressed, his designs also evolved. The first designs he created in 1820, just 2 years after joining, were pretty simple. So in 1825, another set of designs came, which were kind of more depth of experience was visible. And I guess he was forging his fraternal ties with the Grandmaster, and the Grandmaster loved the Harris boards, and every lodge wanted a set of the approved designs. So Harris could hardly keep up with the orders, and he was also the facsimilist at the British Museum. So, and there is an advertisement of 1846 which praises the skills of Harris. The craft tracing boards have been of essential service in promoting instructions among the society at large. They are eagerly sought after every place where Freemasonry is cherished. So for the next couple of decades, he kept on painting these boards because there was so much of demand. And in those days, of course, there were no photocopy machines. Each of the boards had to be hand painted. And in some cases, it was not unusual for a lodge to wait longer than a year once they gave a commission to Harris. He's said to have painted or designed his last board in 1850 for the third degree, which is often referred to as the open grave design. And this was also the period in his life when he found himself reduced to the absolute state of poverty and distress due to partial blindness. So there was some mishap in his life and he lost his eyesight gradually. By 1856, he was completely blind and was paralyzed from a stroke in the same year. And so one of his friends commented that at the age of 66, he is deprived of the only means he possessed of supporting himself, which is painting, and an invalid wife. So he had another problem at hand. In 1860, Harris moved with his wife into a Masonic home for aged Freemasons and their widows. So in the, earlier times, it was named, please note the words, the Asylum for Worthy, Aged, and Decayed Freemasons. Okay. So there used to be something like this, which is now, of course, known as the Royal Masonic Benevolent Institution, RMBI in short. So Harris used his remaining years in this asylum to write poetry to raise money for the RMBI, and he passed away into the ages on December 28, 1873. So, but then this is from one account. Another account talks of how there was a competition done by this Emulation Lodge in 1845. Harris sent his 2 sets, and one of which was a winner, and he last revised them in 1859. So this is from another. I think we are good on time. So, okay. So in all this, who like me, who do not know the details of King Solomon, I have a few lines on him too. I skipped that piece earlier when I showed his picture because I thought it may take longer. So Solomon, for those who may not know him, also called Jedidiah, according to the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, Quran, and Hadith. So he's practically in every book, every religious book of that era, of that time, was a fabulously wealthy and wise king of the United Kingdom of Israel, who succeeded his father, King David. So his reign is almost like some 3,000 years ago, 970 to 931 before Christ, almost like 3,000 years ago, and normally given in alignment with the dates of his father's reign. So he is described as a king of united monarchy, which broke into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah shortly after his death. So after his death, his kingdom fell into 2 pieces. According to Judaic Talmud, Solomon is one of the 48 prophets. The Quran also mentions him or considers him as a major prophet, and the Muslims generally refer to him as the Arabic variant of Solomon, which is Suleiman, but son of David. The Hebrew Bible identifies him as the builder of the first temple in Jerusalem, so which is, of course, the temple that we talk about, bringing in the 4th year of his reign, using the vast amounts of monies and wealth that he and his father would have accumulated. So he dedicated the temple to Yahweh, the God of Israel. He is portrayed as great in wisdom, wealth, and power beyond either of the previous kings of the country, but also the king who sinned. His sins in those times, of course, included things like idolatry, marrying foreign women, and ultimately turning away from Yahweh, which perhaps led to the kingdom being torn into 2 during the reign of his son Rehoboam after his death. So that's what I have for you all today, brethren. Thank you, Virtual Master, for the opportunity. Virtual Brother Dr. Char for encouragement and ideas. Virtual Brother Venkat for his support and the ideas and the quiz. Brother Manoj for pushing me to take it up and his help. And Brother Vikram for his encouragement. Brother all for their encouragement, making something seem pretty big achievement and help me become a better Mason, a better man. I learned quite some during this last 1.5 days that I worked on this, and it was good to be pushed into this. So thanks are, of course, due to Google and masoniclibrary.com.au, masonrytoday.com, blog universal, freemasonry.wordpress.com, and Corona, of course, without which all this camaraderie, networking, all these sessions would not have been possible. If you have any questions, you can ask Virtual Brother, very Virtual Brother Venkat, Virtual Brother Dr. Char, Virtual Brother Vishwa, Virtual Brother Bimal, or anyone except me. Thank you.
Thanks, Brother Sushil. I think one of the best presentations I have seen so far from our lodge. I think good work done. I think a lot of background, etc. You have sort of researched on, And I think the way you presented it, it was a very very professional presentation. I loved it, and I'm sure other brethren also loved it. We will open up.
Thank you for your kind words, Virtual Master. Thank you so much for this opportunity also. Just before we go on to the normal process, Brother Venkat, would you want to stop the recording or something?
So we'll now
Worshipful,
for
worshipful,
questions and questions.
worshipful Master.